You're like,
is
let me tell Senator Harrison.
so we are back live. We now have Damian Leonard from joint from Legislative Council. I almost gave you a promotion. And we are about to start to go through the section by section of H 488.
Okay. For the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So this is the shortest T-bill in 10 years, I think.
For now.
For now. So historically, I would note that the Senate has a reputation as shortening the T-bill. But I'm not sure if that'll be the case this year. We'll have to see. But historically, that is the reputation in the House. So anyway, bringing you to section 1 of the bill, this is standard language that we have in every T-bill. It adopts the Agency of Transportation's proposed transportation program for fiscal year 26 and includes definitions of terms used throughout the T-bill. The real, I guess the sort of substantive changes in the T-bill begin on page 3 in section 2. The first change there is really more of a technical correction. The FY26 transportation program in the rail program included an entry for the Barry Berlin Montpelier WACR subsidy. That subsidy was ended in FY25.
I think you're required to call it the whacker.
Yes. Yeah, there's in the little whack.
Yes.
Well, okay. I'll take that under advisement.
The whacker and little whacker.
Yep. That's what they are.
All right.
And we didn't name it that.
All right. So the whacker subsidy was discontinued last year. It showed back up again, though, in this year's transportation program with funding going out 4 years, which was a mistake.
Okay.
And instead, it should have been replaced with White River Junction depot repairs, specifically repairs to the roof. Same amount of money.
Not the weather bit. Who had a hand in that?
I did not.
Man, it's the accusations.
Is this the money they need to finish this or what?
I don't know. You'll have to ask them specifically. All I know is that this was a 1-for-1 trade for the amount of money that was budgeted in FY25. Dan De La Bruyere had testified to this. And then they sent over the language. I was not present for the testimony in the House. So
I think it's pretty great just that the subsidy is going away. It shows that can be done, and that investments that it took a while for us to do. Because at first there was some criticism that we were subsidizing the railroad. If you invest in the infrastructure, then it can pay for itself with more bridges.
Was this the bridge, right? Wasn't the bridge?
Several bridges and tracks.
Okay.
yeah, it was that subsidy was on the books for several transportation programs leading up to this one. And then last year it finally came to an end. So I think it was a surprise when it showed up back up this year. As soon as Dan testified in the House, he made clear that it was an error when they were putting it together. So. All right. The next section 3, page 4 is relinquishment of a portion of Route 36 in the town of St. Albans. And this is just providing authority for the Secretary of Transportation to relinquish that roadway, subject to reaching agreement with the town of St. Albans.
So they're giving the road to the town.
They are giving a portion of the road to the town. So it looks like it's from the start of Route 36 to mile marker 2.834, so just under 3 miles of Vermont Route 36 would be relinquished.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering as we're going through these sections, personally, I don't need to hear from witnesses on either section 2 or section 3 after we did hear that the House took extensive testimony. But if we have suggestions for witnesses or are planning to hear from these folks, how do you want that to be?
We're gonna hear from the agency on this, to go through.
Okay, do we want, if we are going to hear from the agency on this, do we also want to hear from the town? Should we flag witnesses or?
I think after we hear from the agency, if it doesn't look controversial, I don't have any need to hear from it. If, we get any indication that there's controversy, we'll probably go further.
Okay.
But for this, we're gonna walk through. If any of the members have any issues, we should highlight those and we will get people in on them. But in these that don't look that controversial, I think I want to have the agency talk. And if this isn't it, they aren't giving this this right away to anybody private, they're giving it to the community. So unless they highlight that there's issues, I don't have any problem with. But
Yeah.
if anybody on the committee wants to have some go further than that, I'm willing to do that after.
And if we have sections that we want to add to the T-bill as we go through, do you want us to highlight pieces of
But
information or what would you like?
you should speak up as we're going through this.
Okay,
Okay.
then I would just put forward for any rail related sections, there are sections of S75 that relate to rail. That I would love to have us review.
I think that you're gonna need to bring specifics.
Okay, so I can go, would you like me to do that now?
I think you've highlighted that you're gonna do that. I think we should have in front of us in writing the specifics that you want to bring up. And we'll be going through this numerous times. So for right now, I want to go through this. You've highlighted that you have a couple of rail things. If you could bring back in writing what they are, we'll take them up.
Okay, so what I'll plan to do is for all the sections of S75, which would be all of them, that I'd like to see included in the T-bill, should I just go through and note to Damien where I would like those to be placed as they make sense with the T-bill?
Well, if you got the whole bill, you should need to think a little bit about how we might want to handle.
Okay,
I think it's, for me at least, it's better if they're separate, not in the bill.
yeah,
And just like, so here.
We aren't putting them in the
But they
bill.
could be like, here's seven proposals from Senator White. And each one is separate.
okay,
And I'll have some too, like the extension of the leases thing that you already know about. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so the next couple sections all relate to rail trails. So section 4, which is on the bottom of page 4, all we're doing is we're retitling the chapter in Title 5 called State Acquisition of Railroads to be State-Owned Railroads and Rail Trails. In the section 5 at the top of the next page. Yep.
Before we move on, this is actually, section 4 is where, and maybe we would put it in as a section 5, this is where I would see S4 coming into play, which is
We
the trails.
we have they're on the schedule for tomorrow. We've got testimony from pro and con tomorrow. And we, so, and that the attempt is to get us ready to put it in here.
So I
Unless we hear something that we don't expect.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a question about the saying state-owned railroads
Yep,
instead of state acquisition, that there might be, well,
It's
like,
not,
are there things about private railroads in
No,
this
this
area?
is specifically state-owned railroad right of way.
Okay.
The state owns a number of railroad right of ways. Right, throughout the state. And at this point, I think the agency had proposed changing the title of that to reflect that they're not actively acquiring railroad right of ways so much as managing what they have.
Okay,
And the changes in the next two sections are specifically looking towards managing the rail trails and what activities can and cannot occur on a rail trail.
okay, so there are other sections that deal with privately owned railroads.
Not in the bill.
Well, not in the bill, but
stands right
just
now,
in
but
the-
yes, there's quite a bit of Title V
Okay,
deals with other railroad issues. This is just one small piece of that. So
Okay.
Title V is split between what is called aeronautics, which I love.
yeah,
So air travel, rail travel, and other surface transportation.
great.
And then 19 is highways, 23 is motor vehicles. Those are kind of our areas.
Okay.
And 23 has other sorts of motorized vehicles like boats and ATVs, et cetera, in there. So when we're looking at rail, particularly like the leases, the
Mhm.
lease extensions, that's in a different part of Title V.
Got it. Okay,
Um,
thank you.
so. So the next section, there's only one substantive amendment in the section, and that's on line 16. And that's just saying that the secretary would adopt rules consistent with the provisions of the new section that we're adding
So
in section
given
6.
all of that, where are you getting?
We're on page 5, line 16. Is that one? It's just providing that rules adopted by the secretary governing the interim trail use of state-owned railroad rights of way that are in rail bank status, in other words, use as rail trails,
Yep,
has to be consistent with the new provisions that are being adopted in section 6.
okay.
So is everybody on the committee familiar with what rail banking is?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. That was the question up
It's a
there.
rail trail.
Yeah, it's basically it could go back to being a railroad at some
It
point
could,
in the
but
future,
yeah, right,
It's unlike
a rail trail.
but right.
Oh,
Or it could be an unofficial trail. It could just be that it's nothing.
It could be that it's nothing.
It could be
There.
nothing, but more than likely, it's the Loyal Valley Rail Trail, it's the Missisquoi Trail, it's.
Although some of those aren't banked anymore, like the Loyal Valley Rail Trail is never going to be ever railroaded again. I mean, I guess it could.
why did,
Yeah, I
It's,
think
but it's rail bank.
yeah, I think it's still in rail
Oh,
bank
still,
status,
It's still in
Um,
rail bank status, and
or
when
at
you
least
look at,
portions of it.
and when you look at the map they give you of the railroads in the state, it will have that with dotted lines. The rail trails.
Right, well, I thought there was another process, like it was, you bank it, then when you turn it into a trail, you go to something different, but maybe not all of this.
So
why don't you tell me
My-
what drill?
yeah.
Because I actually don't know.
So basically I can tell you about rail banking and how a rail banked. I can give you a basic idea of what happens when you're going to rail trail status. I don't know about the process for taking something out of rail bank status to make it a permanent rail trail. I would say that the agency would be probably a good resource on that. Jackie Casino, who heads up that program, came in and testified
One
in
of
the
the
House.
best names is Big Over.
Totally.
So basically what happens is if you have a railroad that is no longer in use, the state can place it in rail bank status, which basically means like it's not actively being used as a railroad, but it could go back into use as a railroad if the need arises in the future. So there have been instances where rail banked rights of way, as a city has grown, what used to be a freight railroad becomes a new commuter railroad line. It gets taken out of rail bank status and put back into use as a commuter line or something like that. Given the way Vermont is, it's unlikely that we're going to be turning any of these railroads into commuter lines anytime soon. Although it could happen in the future.
But we still on the right.
Right, we own the right of way, and it's under federal law, we put it into rail bank status, which means it can be turned back into railroad right of way. While it's in rail bank status, you can put it into interim trail use as a rail trail. And that's what we've done with the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. I believe the rail trail that runs through Danville is also in rail bank status. And then,
That's the.
is that Lamoille Valley there too?
Yeah, it's from St. Johnsbury to.
Oh, okay. I thought
There are
there was-
two other rail trails.
And then there's the parts of the Cross Vermont Trail, our old rail bed. I don't know if that's rail bank status or not, but again, Jackie has all the answers on these questions. So she can
I would
answer that.
just warn you. If we're gonna get through this bill, and we've got 2 weeks, we have limited time.
Yeah, I've learned all I need to know about railway. Thank you.
I don't mean to
No,
No,
cut
no, no,
anybody
that's fine.
off,
I'm just,
but
That's good
we've
because you now
got,
know everything I know.
we've got 2 weeks
yeah,
and,
okay.
Can I ask you a question on this language?
Yes.
Maybe help speed it up. It seemed like when the House transportation books were in, they made it seem like all this was existing language, even though it's all underlined.
So it is, yeah, that's not quite accurate.
Okay.
So it is new language. This was recommended. They were looking at adopting rules governing the use of rail trails. And in particular, there are certain activities that have started to occur on some rail trails that they want authority to prohibit and regulate. So their advice of their council was, it would be good to get the legislature's blessing to put it into statute, and then adopt rules consistent with the legislation.
So
And so that's what this
wasn't
is.
lifted from somewhere else. Because remember, he said, oh, there was an argument in the past about whether you can hunt on a rail trail. And so they added fishing to the
Right.
instead of harassing or molesting wildlife.
Right, so I think they've been regulating these uses on the rail trails, so I think that's probably a better way to say it is they've been regulating these uses. My understanding is they wanted to codify
Okay. So
what the regulated uses are.
ART might have had this language as an unofficial rule, but they kind of took that.
Right,
And on that issue, I wondered if fishing was harassing or molesting.
it is, that's why there's an exception for
But
it.
is it both or one?
It depends on how you do it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would say that it can be both.
Okay.
I would say that, anything that harms the fish can probably fall under molesting.
Or in harassing.
And just the act of fishing could be under harassing. That said, they've created the exception here because that is an acceptable use on rail trails.
As it should.
So, what they're basically doing is prohibiting various acts. So they can be summarized as number one is essentially littering. Number two is damaging plant life. Number three is damaging structures, including vandalism. Number four is placing various signs and advertising without authorization from the trail sponsor. And the way this was explained was that in the same way they regulate the placement of signs along a state highway. So for example, political signs can go up, but there are certain rules that they follow. They would do the same thing here because these are state rights of way. And then selling goods and services, again, they just want the ability to regulate that. So that you can't just have a free-for-all, but instead they could have, say, food trucks show up at designated locations or things like that. Parades, demonstrations, again, they want the right to regulate it. As a state, we can't prohibit that because that's protected speech, but we can regulate time, place, and manner. Harassing or molesting wildlife. This originally started off as hunting, harassing, or molesting wildlife except for fishing. The language was changed to what you see now, because there were concerns that individuals who might use some of the rail trails to access areas where hunting is permitted, you could run into misunderstandings and conflict if hunting was listed and someone is walking down the trail carrying their rifle or their crossbow. And I believe trapping was listed too. So trapping is not permitted within a specific distance of the right of way. Hunting is not permitted within the right of way because these are treated as state rights of way. And so under existing law, that's already not permitted. Fishing has been permitted historically in designated locations, and they'll continue to do that. The original language proposed said carrying, using, or discharging any firearm. It was updated to using or discharging because you cannot prohibit the carrying of firearms on public property unless there's a special safety interest. So we amended that. And the using or discharging any firearm or other weapons or fireworks, except as permitted or otherwise by the trail sponsor or otherwise permitted by law, brings us into line with the Second Amendment requirements.
Good. Is the number 6, the picnics, like really no picnicking? Like if there's like 2
Like,
people.
except at times and locations approved by the trail sponsor.
I
So,
just could do it in the middle of the trail.
right. I think they're basically what they want to prevent is people blocking the trail. But then if you're in the right of way and there's a grassy patch or picnic tables, obviously that's permitted.
Okay.
So I think a number of these come down to concerns about blocking or damaging the right of way,
Right.
or otherwise interfering with people using the right of way. Fires except in designated locations, soliciting alms or contributions, use of motorized vehicles except as authorized, and during the winter when the vast trails are open, since some of those trails are in the vast. And then also if you have a disability or you're using an electric bike as permitted by state rules. And then finally, overnight camping, except at areas that are designated by the trail sponsor. Just to be clear, the trail sponsor in the vast majority of instances is the state, but there are a couple instances where the municipality is the entity that's maintaining the trail and therefore becomes the trail sponsor within the meeting here. And then the penalty is consistent with the section and the penalty in section 5. And so that's been on the books for a number of years now. So it's a civil penalty of not
The
more.
only
Here's the-
motorized,
I remember that.
the only motorized vehicle that can go is the snow machines when they're on the,
So it's maintenance vehicles, snow machines, when the vast network is open. And it's on a designated vast trail. Power driven mobility devices. So that could be an electric wheelchair or other device for someone who has a ambulatory or mobility disability, electric bikes, and then there's also a catch-all, other circumstances that the trail sponsor determines are appropriate.
does this include crossing the trail?
I imagine that falls under other circumstances that the trail sponsor determines are appropriate, but you may want
Are
to.
we clear
clarify.
in here about that? I have, the first 2 things that come to mind are, most of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail that goes along is through farmland. And we have all kinds of tractors and farm equipment going back and forth across the trail. And the trail, the right of way is wide enough, so it does stretch out into the fields.
Mhm.
Also, there is at least 2 places that I can think of in my area where there are ATV trails that are laid out mostly on private property, but they do cross the rail trail. And I think I'm not contemplating that what this wants to do is eliminate either of those.
That was not the impression that I got. I can't speak for the agency. As it stands right now, I think all of that could fall under other circumstances that the trail sponsor determines are appropriate. But that leaves the determination up to AOT. So you may want to either seek clarity from them or consider amending it to specifically call out crossing the trail to access property on either side of the trail. Or to travel from one side of the trail to the other.
We should probably at least talk about it today. Because particularly the farm stuff, I have, the best farmland in, going across, some of the best farmland going across northern Vermont is all along the 93 miles of the rail trail. The Missisquoi Trail is all in, along the Missisquoi River and in agricultural land. So I think we wanna just make sure.
Okay.
Just on rail trails, we have a rail trail, but it's not a state rail trail, so, I'm just gonna absorb this information and let our folks know. Cause they might wanna be a state one, or they might not wanna be a state.
Yeah, I think part of it is who owns the right of way.
Right,
And then,
and we don't need to get into
yeah.
that, I just wanted to note it, because it's a West River Trail, there was a train there.
And it's not on their.
Right, no, I know
there's-
it's not an official one, but I just want to mention it so people know about it, and I'm not suggesting that it be an official one, because I don't think we're ready for this amount of regulation.
Okay. So section 7, this is one minor change to the transportation board, which you can find on page 9. Right now, the governor appoints the chair and the members of the board. But there's no clarity about who would appoint other board officers. So this would give them the right to appoint their own officers apart from the chair. That's it.
That's a good idea.
Chair.
Because I thought, when I read this at first, I thought it meant appointing the other officers as members, but it means
Right.
they're
So the
already
governor-
members.
Yeah, the governor shall appoint the board members. The governor shall appoint the chair, and the board may vote to appoint other officers. So it's just giving them that authority. If they want to use it, they don't have to.
So like if they needed a clerk of the committee.
A clerk or a vice chair.
Yeah, probably a vice chair, and
So-
there isn't one now.
Yeah, it's okay, the next is the powers of the transportation board in section 8. Down on page 9 here, lines 17 and 18. So right now, the statute provides that the transportation board hears appeals related to the execution of contracts awarded by the agency or municipalities cooperating with the agency. And this adds language to address the question of what if there's an appeal from the bid process. So your bid lost and you believe that the decision was rendered incorrectly, and this provides that the agency itself would hear the appeals relating to bids.
Yeah, I just have a question about this, because just when I was on the board, I don't recall any of those issues. Mostly it was there was a problem in the execution of the contract.
Right, and that will continue to remain with the board.
But I'm just wondering why this is here.
I think they can answer that question
Okay,
for you.
I'll just ask them.
Okay.
Yep. The only other change in there is just replacing the term junkyards with salvage yards to use a more up-to-date term for those facilities. Section 9 on page 10, this is amending the Green Mountain Transit Authority's charter. It's our only transit authority with a charter. So as you know, they're currently negotiating for a revision to their operation area. And what this does is it provides flexibility for that process. So it provides that their area of operation shall be in Chittenden County for fixed route bus service, and that they may operate outside of Chittenden County or demand response transit within Chittenden County as determined by ART's public transit grant process. So it basically provides flexibility to continue operating around Chittenden County and outside of it, depending on where things go.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a comment on that. It's not a big deal, but I just think it should be as determined by the Agency of Transportation and not necessarily a public transit grant process, because there may be other sources of funding. But I'll ask them when they come in.
Okay, well, I'm putting agency to talk about, this, down. If
Yeah.
you want more than that, if any of this you feel uncomfortable about, and it should go beyond the agency. I'm trying to come up with a list and so far I haven't seen anything that I really.
On the transportation board one, I may want to,
I put okay next to, them having a vice chair or that.
yeah, that's,
We gotta hear from the agency under the expansions related to bids.
yeah, we just might want to hear from somebody from the transportation board on that, but can I think about it a bit?
Sure, but, I'm trying to organize,
Okay.
get people in.
It would be the transportation board attorney probably,
Okay.
or the chair.
Okay,
Okay, so at the bottom of page 10, you'll notice that we've deleted some language from the charter. This is obsolete language from the early 1970s when the Transit Authority was formed relating to the initial terms of commissioners. We're just taking it out to update things.
Obsolete language.
Yes, so this next section, section 10, beginning on page 11, this is a pretty significant one in terms of the T-Fund. So this will take the funding for the state aid for town highway structures and the state aid for the Class 2 town highway road program. And just like we did for the general state town highway aid formula, it puts them on an inflator that's tied to either the percentage increase in appropriations from the T-Fund or the growth in the CPI, whichever is less in any given year. And we did this for the general fund. And so they're all going to be calculated so that whatever percentage increase one has, the other two have as well. So if it's if we have 1% growth in T-Fund appropriations, and CPI was above that, you would see 1% growth in all three of these. If growth was negative in either the T-Fund appropriations or CPI, these would remain flat. And this is just ensuring that those programs continue to grow with at least some measure of inflation, even if it's not quite keeping up with inflation.
Just a quick question on that one. Okay, so I'm used to the Quimby Amendment, which this is basically that, or what is
This is taking the Quimby Amendment, which is in subsection A, and applying it to subsection. So the general state aid for town highways is the so-called Quimby Amendment. And then E is basically applying it to the state aid for town highway structures. And then
This is
in subsection H, down on page 14, we're applying it to the Class 2 town highway roadway program. So
I'm extremely excited to see this. Obviously, no comment from you, Damien, on if you like this or not, but can you just reflect for me a little bit more on we're not changing anything to do with town highway aid in this. It's just really mirroring. So the House didn't put forward any changes to that.
no, the only change in there is on advice of joint fiscal. So the way you calculate the percentage change in the total appropriations from the T-Fund is you exclude the appropriations from the town highway aid formula currently. And now we're going to exclude the appropriations from all three aid programs. And that way what this avoids doing is if you had a year where you had a large bump in one of those programs, throwing it off so that they get artificially inflated or, and then to avoid having them end up with, Chris and Logan figured out that there was a scenario where you could have these all increasing by different amounts.
Yeah.
And so by pulling them all out together and calculating one rate, it simplifies the rate calculation process and ensures that they're moving in step with each other going forward. So that's the only change there, is just an adjustment to make sure that it will move in step. And then the language for the other two mirrors the state town highway aid program, but because those are grant programs, we also have to have the minimum grant increasing by the same inflator. Otherwise, you'd have a minimum grant of 7.2 million and your appropriation could be much higher.
That is extremely helpful. Thank you.
I will say to the committee, from my vantage point, I've asked the agency to think about this, and I've asked the league, and I plan on having them in. We have no real concept of the need in communities. And this is all well and good, but when you base it on a number that you're only increasing 2 or 3% a year, and we have no idea what the need is in the community, it seems, and we have no idea of the inflation. We have the agency come in, they talk about they've had 40% inflation in projects, and we have no idea what the inflation is for communities. We have no idea about the status of, we can get road pavement that says good, poor, very poor, for all the state system, but we have none of that for towns. I'm interested in finding a place where we can better collect the information. I asked Jeremy to think about that. And I want to spend at least a little time and get some language in here that deals with what is their need. This is all well and good, but it's an inflationary increase on a number that I think in some cases might be.
Yeah, this is you're making yes, that is the same point that I'm trying to make, is we're not changing the town highway aid formula, but we're basing an increase
And I don't
for
think,
them, and I don't think it's meeting their need now,
I
so
don't-
it kind of feels like.
Yeah.
So are you hoping to introduce language then around section 10 that would create a place for
I'm
data?
hoping to get people in here, and I would like to see us put some language in that deals with how do we get at the data that is really needed and who should collect that.
I love that. I would be
Yeah.
very supportive of that.
So
I don't know what it would look like, but
I didn't think we could find a future legislation, I didn't think we could
You
say.
can't. So there's nothing that prevents you from putting this language in statute. What it does is it creates the default.
Okay,
And then you can always not withstand this language in the
Okay.
future year. So for example, if we,
all right, that's,
if we
you're
had
not-
a nightmare scenario where we needed the T-fund money somewhere else,
yeah,
you could always pull this back.
so
Or
this
if
would be
you
like the
had-
first draft.
Right, or if you have a year where you have a lot of town needs and there's money available, you could appropriate more and then just not. Part of the reason why we exclude these changes is you could appropriate that as one-time money and then not count it for the next year in terms of how you're
Okay.
determining the inflator and so forth. So we talked through a number of these scenarios in the House because they had similar concerns. What if we bump up the money one year? Is that going to throw us off in out years? And the answer is no, you can just appropriate it separately and then say the money is used for that and it's one-time funding.
okay.
So there are ways around that. And we do it all the time. with other formulas that are in statute.
Did they talk about why they chose the EPIU as the measure?
That they use that because that's what was in there for the state town highway formula program. So that's, we just went back and mirrored that language. And so it's the lesser of the CPIU and the percentage increase in appropriations to AOT from the T fund.
And I think part of we asked that question when the chair and vice chair came in, why, what they used as a measure for that. And quite frankly, it has very little to do with what we've seen in, for state projects in construction costs. And in the next few years, if the price of steel and aluminum and all the things we build with goes rocketing out around the rest of the economy, I'm not opposed to having an inflationary increase of what we're doing, but I don't think it's tracked very well with what's really going on.
Yeah. And there's other indices that,
There are,
but
to add a little bit more to that, the CPIU is the one we typically use in our statutes. I know there are a number of other inflators, and there are arguments in favor of a number of them. It's also worth noting that the way the CPIU increase is calculated is it's the month. They take the CPIU increase for the month ending on June 30th in the calendar year 1 year prior to the first day of the fiscal year, compared to the CPIU for the month in the calendar year 2 years prior. And part of that is because of the funding process. So inherently in this, you also have a large delay. So as we've seen in the last couple of years, inflation can change significantly from 1 year to the next. And then with it being the lesser, because we have a T fund that is growing very slowly or is stagnant at this point, you may actually just see that this is flat funded until your T fund gets a healthy funding source going forward. So those are a couple of things to keep in mind.
Because of the lesser of the two.
It's the lesser of the two. And that I think was put in because people saw that the T fund was starting to not keep up with inflation. And the worry was that you would be stripping money away from state projects to send it to the towns. So. All right. I know we're at 12. Do you want to pick this up tomorrow or keep going?
We can pick it up tomorrow.
Okay.
We've
got about 5 pages left to go at this point. So
we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll see you with S4. My goal would be that we hear enough tomorrow that we could say incorporate that, and we have a show of hands and incorporate that into the bill.
okay. Have you guys scheduled Tucker for S4?
Yes, Tucker's on.
Okay, great.
No, Tucker's not.
I'll get it.
Okay.
We should have Tucker.
Maybe we'll go now.
What's that?
You wanna go